So I'm just going to give you sort of a brief rundown of what it is, who I am, and then we can kind of dive into more detail. So who am I? Okay, so my name is Ryan Vandendyck. This is my first year at CGDC, so unless we've talked in the last day or so, you might not know too much about me. But so this September will be my 10-year anniversary in the video game industry. My first game I worked on was Mario Strikers Charge for the Nintendo Wii. I was a programmer on that, and then did gameplay programming on Spider-Man, Friend or Foe. Then I worked as a game designer, since I like programming and design, so then I worked as a game designer at a company called Silicon Knights. If you know them, they're now defunct, but did some interesting stuff there. And then I ended up going back to Next Level Games. That's where I worked on Mario Strikers and Spider-Man, because they would let me work on my games on the evenings and weekends, which is very rare in the game industry. Usually, when you get a job, you have to sign a contract that says anything you work on, whether at home or at the office, belongs to the company, and you cannot make anything of your own, unless you want to give them the rights, which is not a great proposition. But they would let me do it, so while working for them, I was doing Ghost Recon AI for that, and then AI on Luigi's Mansion Dark Moon on 3DS. I was working on my first game, Waveform, on the evenings and weekends. Ended up quitting at the end of 2011 to focus on my own company and Waveform full-time, which was kind of, it was a hard decision in a lot of ways. I really loved working at the company on, I'm a huge Nintendo fan, so working on those Nintendo properties was amazing. I got to meet Shigeru Miyamoto. He came to see the game. It was really, really cool. But still, I had this kind of tug on my heart. I wanted to get these ideas, these passions out of me into the world, and I really just wanted to see what I could create. So, quit to release Waveform in 2012, and then Citizens of Earth was our second game in 2015, and we have a bunch more on the way, including Event Horizon, which is in the expo now. So that's kind of who I am. So, for anyone who has not seen Citizens of Earth, I'm going to do the trailer here for you. This comes up, okay. It's out here. Okay, here we go.
Brian's gonna leave.
My fellow citizens of Earth, it is with great humility and worthiness that I accept your appointment to the Vice Presidency. As we all know, our planet has had its share of problems. A wildlife that's grown increasingly more hostile. The occasional horde of killer mutant robot creatures. Protesters that block traffic and wake us up on weekends. I know I'm not the smartest tool in the shed, but I am a tool nonetheless. That brings hope and peace and so many other things that tested well these past few months. I have traveled this planet. I have met its citizens, seen its wonders, and I learned something. I learned that even if I'm not the most qualified person for this job, I darn well intend to look good while doing it. I can honestly say that there is no other planet I'd rather be vice president of. Thank you, citizens of Earth.
Yeah, so that was one of the trailers that Atlas, our publisher, put together. Oh, I think this is an older one. Anyway, it's okay? Okay, switching back. So, Citizens of Earth. Slide here. Let's see. It comes back. Okay, what is Citizens of Earth? Okay, so it is a modern, humorous take on the classic JRPG in which you control the Vice President of the Earth. So he's the main character you saw walking around in the suit, looking all cool. And a key feature of the game is that regular people are the heroes. So instead of an RPG, you're recruiting mages and warriors, right? In this game, it's just regular people. So you have the town baker, a homeless guy, an architect, a lifeguard, school teacher, and you recruit these guys and you bring them into battle, and they all all fight with things like their job, right? So the baker heals people with baked goods, the barista throws scalding coffee on the enemies, right? That kind of stuff, right? And yeah, it's kind of a crazy, fun, cartoony world. Some of the enemies here, it's like a telephone, it's like a deer with a phone in his head, like a very sad, gloomy cloud, and just kind of on and on, just kind of playing up the humor. Oh yeah.
Do you want questions at the end, or?
Yeah, good point. Yeah, if you could just anytime you got questions, pop your hand up. Yeah, question.
Where's the president?
The president, okay, so the president is part of the story. You'll meet him, but one of the reasons we did the vice president was I thought, like, we wanted kind of the main character to be someone that, is leading around this team, but not getting involved in battles. And I thought, well, who's the perfect person to lead people around and not get their hands dirty? A politician? And what's like the most useless version of that? It would be the vice president. So I thought that would be kind of the funniest incarnation of the leader. Yeah, good question. Yeah, and actually that's a good point. So at any time, if I'm saying anything, you want clarity, toss your hands up. I mean, I can talk about Citizens of Earth for days and weeks, but if all I do is just, rehash stuff I know, yeah, it may not be helpful for you. So if there's anything that'll, be helpful for you, just ask away. Okay, so that's kind of what the game is. Origin of the idea. So the idea for this game actually predated our first game, Waveform, and as I said, it was very simple. It's what if the NPCs of the game were the heroes? Because you play so many RPGs, it's like, the world is coming to an end, the ultimate evil is coming to destroy us, but you still gotta pay $100 to sleep in the inn. Right? It's like, wouldn't the world come together if like everyone's lives were at stake? So that was kind of the idea. Like, what if there were no heroes? It was just regular people stepping up, right? So that was kind of the origin of the idea. And so the modern kind of setting flowed naturally from this idea, since we wanted a large pool of like regular people. Like in antiquity, or so the fantasy setting, there aren't as many jobs, right? Like in modern, we have lots of jobs, lots of kind of cool costumes and caricatures that we could draw from to kind of make a really fun cast. And then, like I just mentioned, what kind of leader do we want? A politician was sort of a fun idea for the main character. Yeah, so it was a very humble beginning. So development began sort of seriously in May 2012. So this was a couple months after we launched Waveform. We did whatever DLC and fixes and stuff, and then we thought, okay, on to the next game. And I don't know if you're familiar with Waveform. It's not an RPG. It's a very weird game. You play as like a wave of light, as a sine wave. So from that to an RPG was a very big jump and kind of a huge shift. But I love RPGs, my favorite genre, so I really wanted to make one and thought, okay, I've got one game under my belt. It's time to make the RPG that I wanted to make. Unfortunately, I had a very limited and unstable staff at the time. So Waveform was mostly me. I had some other contractors and stuff, but so moving into this game was still at the start mostly just me. So we had basically no artists at the start. We had another programmer that I had worked with at other mainstream jobs, so I knew him well, but he could only contribute while on the train to his day job. So obviously very limited. But we said we had the passion, we wanted to make it, so we just said, who cares? We don't have art, we don't have anything. We're gonna make some stuff here. So we had the code from Waveform. So we used our own engine. We created our own engine, which I'll be going into a little more when I talk tomorrow. But as I mentioned, Waveform is a very different game, but it serves sort of a technical foundation we kind of leap from to make an RPG, but still it's a lot of work to do. And the plan, since we had done this for Waveform, was to basically release kind of an English language release on Steam, self-published, and that was pretty much our goal. But the final results were quite a bit different. So we were published by Atlas. If you like RPGs, you probably know Atlas. They do lots of RPGs, and they're strategy games like that. They're very, very good kind of partner for us on this. We did a simultaneous release in January 2015 on 5 platforms in 5 languages. I don't know too many games, indie or otherwise, that do this. It was pretty, Atlas had never done it. They never even had released a Wii U game, so that was kind of a new thing for both of us. But it was a huge undertaking, but pretty cool. We got voice acting by folks that were very famous for anime and games. If you watch any English kind of dub anime or play video games, especially RPGs, we got all those voice actors in the game. It was really incredible. You can't see them in the credits because they did a non-union thing, so we couldn't credit them, but they did it, and it was pretty cool. And we had a booth at E3. So growing up, I loved seeing the news from E3, seeing the videos, right? So we had our own booth. We were right beside Nintendo when they debuted Smash Bros. On Wii U. So it was literally we were here, there's a walkway, and Nintendo Smash Bros. Here. So we had so much traffic come by to see the game. It was really cool. And then we were nominated for 2 Best of Show awards, which was really awesome. Yeah, a ton of fun. And yeah, so very different, right? We're not really expecting this when we started, but we really wanted to kind of aim big once we saw like what we could, kind of turn this game into.
Who's helping with that?
Yeah, so we did all that work. I mean, essentially, everything for the game. Basically, how it worked, right, is we negotiated a contract with Atlas. They said, we'll give you X money, and you have to then do everything, right? So we did all the platform ports, all the localization. Everything was just from like one, kind of fund, right? So yeah, we had to buy like dev kits for all the platforms. And dev kits are not cheap. They're about $2,500 a pop. A little bit of variance on which platform it is, but still pretty expensive. And yeah, so we ported our engine to all those different platforms. And I'll kind of get into why that is significant a little bit later. Yeah, so project goals. So one of the big things that I kind of have as sort of like a mantra for the company is I want people to play the game and they look at it and they say, that's an indie game? Instead of, oh, it's an indie game. It's basically the same words, but the inflection for me like makes all the difference, right? I want people to look at it and be so surprised by kind of like the polish and the content, and then realize like, oh, like, just a couple guys made this? Like, that's crazy, as opposed to looking at it and being like, well, obviously it's an indie game, look at it. You know what I mean? So that was sort of a big goal we had. We wanted a huge cast of playable characters. So, like I said, the goal was play as every NPC. So I think this is probably all of them. Let's see here, you can tell, there's every, and you probably recognize some of the professions maybe, but we got a couple weird ones in there. So we had about like 50 hours of gameplay, a lot, like there's like maybe 20 in the core story, then like 30 or so or more maybe if you recruit all the citizens, do all the optional quests. So we wanted like a big game. Yeah, 50 hours again for like an indie RPG was pretty ambitious, but we really wanted again like people to look at it and say like, I'm getting my money's worth out of this game, right? Another thing we really wanted to do was this concept we had of broader, not longer. And so I know myself as I get older, I have less and less time to play games. So especially for something like a 50-hour game, like that takes a commitment to sit through a whole game, right? So we really wanted something that was sort of open-ended enough that anyone could kind of sit down, get what they want out of it, and then be like, that was great, I'm out, right? So if they want to recruit everyone, they can do that. If they want to just kind of hit the highlights of the story, they can do that too. But just build it in such a way that, yeah, didn't force you to just like sit down for 50 hours to get, kind of what you want out of it. And kind of along with that, we have this goal of streamlined, not simplified. And what I mean by that is, there's a lot of RPGs where you get into a battle, you're just like mash button, whatever, let me get through this. And, it's sure, like it is streamlined in a sense because you can just mash attack to get through everything, but it's so simple and it's not fun. And so what we wanted to do was recognize that, not everyone wants to, manage every bit of like, min-maxing of their stats and their abilities, but they still want to, enjoy the combat and get into it, right? So we had a system basically where, a lot of the very like nitty-gritty details were sort of one step removed. So if you want to like customize all your equipment, you can. You don't have to. It's kind of like optional strategic choices rather than like linear upgrades like you might think in some games where you're like, if I don't upgrade all my characters, we're going to start getting hammered, right? And things like that. So it was really the idea that we wanted to appeal to people who, again, they just want to kind of get in, see the story, see the world, get the idea, and then also those that said, yeah, I really want to like maximize all my characters, I want to get all the stuff I can get out of this, and just kind of hit both those audiences. And then again, the classic sort of RPG gameplay in a modern setting, which is, I think, relatively uncommon for an RPG to have a modern setting. One game that was sort of inspiring for us was Earthbound, which is also in a modern setting. And I'm a huge fan of Earthbound. I had in my wedding, I had Earthbound music as part of it. So yeah, big fan, so it really inspired me. I'm going to get into a bit of what that meant for us as well. Okay, the good. We had a very fun sort of marketable theme. You saw the kind of trailer, and the vice president of the world is kind of at the forefront. It's definitely not your average character. Again, it's sort of like modern, humorous kind of world. Regular people are the heroes. Like, it was really easy to tell people this kind of like line. Regular people are the heroes, vice president of the world, and they get it, right? Oh, that's funny, okay. So we reached a very large player base. So we had, in the end, 5 platforms in 6 languages. We had it Japan release later. It was a big undertaking, but it was really cool to have people essentially all over the world. It's like North America, Europe, Japan, and Australia, other territories, playing it on almost every device. I mean, came out on 5 different platforms, so just being able to have people sort of all over the world on most devices be able to play it was very cool. And again, we had a really big result from a very small team. We're small and unstable. I'll get into that a bit later as well. But we really set out to accomplish our goal of something like big and kind of demonstrated like what we can do if we really pour our passion into it, right? Okay, so that's the good. The bad. Yeah, we stretched ourselves a bit too thin. Again, we were building a big game with a small team, so that's hard. It sometimes proved too hard for us to handle and polish to the best of our ability. I mean, again, if you have 50 hours of content, I mean, that takes a week to play it. Like, there's a lot there. So if you want to make sure every bit of it, is sort of as high quality as you can, I mean, it just takes a lot of time to get through all that content, and it showed in some areas, and so we learned our lesson there. So the art style was kind of divisive. I like it. I think it's fun. It's cartoony. It's kind of very lively characters. Some people don't like it. They think it's, I don't know, cartoons are, I guess, for kids, or I don't know, they think of RPGs as either pixel games or anime, and sort of a cartoony kind of humor setting did not fit their idea of what an RPG should be. So yeah, that was kind of, you gotta love it or hate it. Actually, it wasn't just the art style. After this game came out, Atlas told us it was the most polarizing game they had ever released in their company history, in terms of like people loving it or hating it, and kind of everything in between. So, I don't know, it's an interesting footnote, I guess. I'd rather everyone just loved it, but, what are you gonna do? Geographical challenges. So I'm from Canada, and we had a lot of people in Canada, obviously, working on the game, so across the whole country, and across the US, and we had our localizers in Europe. So trying to coordinate all those people across many, many different time zones was very, very hard. Especially, I mean, it's not just, again, time zone difference, but like we literally could never meet up, right? Like some of us did occasionally, but of course it would have been impossible for all of us to get together. So you can just imagine sort of what the communication challenges, we faced in that, just trying to coordinate, Skype meetings and a lot of emails back and forth, but it really, cannot compare to sitting in a room with someone, both looking at the game and just, sharing ideas and stuff. So a lot of sort of remote collaboration, which, I mean, I'm glad we were able to do it, but yeah, it was tough. The ugly. Okay. So QA was a very big problem for us. Contractually, Atlas was responsible for handling the QA. Since I think Michael said if this is being live streamed, I'll be careful what I say with this. It just didn't work out well. They spent almost as much money on QA as the whole rest of the project combined, and it still did not go that smoothly or that well. We had a lot of sort of bugs to fix after launch. Again, it was a big game, a lot to test and stuff, but that was a lesson I really learned and never want to repeat. Again, I'm not trying to put all the blame on them, but definitely just don't want to get into a situation where we have that kind of problem. And again, doing in so many platforms and languages, I mean, like, so I don't know if you're aware of this, but like, Nintendo and Sony, Europe and North America and Japan, I mean, they're all sort of separate, right? Like, if you want to submit your game to Nintendo, you submit it once to North America and once to Europe. And they have their own, process for evaluating it and testing it and certifying it. And so we had, I mean, if you count, I guess, sort of Steam is just one, I guess, right? But then the other 4 platforms had 2 territories each, so like 9 total SKUs that we're sort of keeping track of, and again, having to go through kind of bureaucracy on all of them and all the different, requirements. And so that's all to say, I'm not saying, Atlas is the problem, not necessarily. It was a lot to do and a lot to keep track of, and just didn't quite work out. Online communities were kind of a problem for us. So, like I said, I love Earthbound. I thought it was a great game. I had, like I said, had it at my wedding. It was awesome. I'm not like, I don't really was involved in the communities, but I would love, reading fan stuff and, looking at the sites and just, really enjoying that people love this game however many years later. So I thought, well, it's so natural that I would say, this game is inspired by Earthbound, I love it. People hated that. It was, again, pretty divisive, but most people, at least online, just mentioning the name Earthbound in the same sentence of Citizens of Earth just caused immense hatred. So if you go to any preview of the game, any review, almost invariably you'll have people saying this isn't anything like Earthbound, how dare they compare it? And really we never compared, we never said, oh, this is like Earthbound, it's like a sequel to Earthbound, nothing really like that. We just said, hey, we love Earthbound, it inspired us. People did not like it. Except in person at E3, we'd have people come, they would say they literally saw the game from across the show floor and came all the way over to see it because it reminded them of Earthbound. So I think maybe a little bit different between the online anonymity, you can say kind of whatever you want, and then in person they can come and talk to us and see it. So I'm not quite sure what the takeaway from that is. I mean, maybe I'll just say my next game I was inspired by a cooking TV show, I don't know, it's totally made up. Yeah, it was weird. I really didn't expect that reaction, and it was very tough to deal with in a lot of ways. Stable staff. We'll go into this a bit more.
Mentally?
Yeah. Well, mentally they were probably all right. What was that?
Every game developer, though.
Well.
We're going to talk about mental instability.
Yeah, so we didn't even have kind of a core team. I mean, so there was myself, like I mentioned, the art director who later came on to do all this kind of fun art with the mole and everyone else. He was not part of the game from the start. We just kind of got him later on. So that was a really tough kind of transition, bringing on someone on the art side later and doing what you can sort of the time left. Especially once we had a publisher, they have in exchange for them funding the game, they have very specific and strict guidelines of when you have to send them builds, right? So every 2 months or a month, we had to send them a playable version of the game, and then when we had staff, sometimes would just flake out and disappear. Well, suddenly we're scrambling to try to meet these contractual deadlines, or else we start getting in a lot of trouble. So that was also very difficult, and again, the geographical kind of widespread nature did not help. But, I missed one. Okay. Oh, the Miraculous. So.
Actually,
yeah.
question if you go back to
Yeah.
the really bad.
Oh.
So with the online the
Yeah.
online communities, did you find that they were, voting down your game on Steam, or was there a lot of negative?
Yeah,
feedback
and
attached to that?
well, I mean that's a little hard to say, but I know there definitely are. If you go now to look at the Steam reviews, there are very negative reviews that say things like, "This game is not like Earthbound. I don't know why they say it is."
Okay.
0 reviews, or 0 stars, or whatever it is, right?
Yeah. There's only a lot of comparison to the thing that other people have been comparing it to that were outside your control, which is kind of weird because I get the same thing from my game sometimes. It's like because they'll say it's like an Earthbound with samurai, Afro samurai mixed into it, or something weird like that, right? And so now you got me freaking out.
Yeah. I mean, you might be okay. I don't know. It's hard to predict what online people are going to do. So, but yeah, it was tough. And sometimes, I do a thing on Reddit, hey, ask me anything type thing or whatever, and people just downvote, how dare you, say. So it was.
Discussion is helpful, but
It's
if
Reddit.
it's actually plummeting your ratings, that's.
Yeah, I mean, and again, I would, sort of in the beginning, I would try, go on a lot of these sites and kind of just engage them and say, well, actually, it's kind of different, da-da-da. But I mean, eventually, it just got really kind of tiresome, really kind of burnt me out, to be honest, just kind of having to have the same, I sort of have a policy of, kind of kill them with kindness, I don't want to, kind of go into the negativity, but I say, oh, well, thanks for looking at the game, but, what do you think about this kind of thing? But it really just, kind of became too much after a while, so, the Miraculous, so actually releasing the game, like I said, on 5 platforms in 5 languages, plus Japanese, considering sort of our humble beginnings and, like I mentioned, some of the trouble in actually developing it, the fact that this actually happened is sort of still amazing to me, and really just, I thank God that we did it, because it definitely was a very hard process, so that was great. Having Atlas as a publisher, again, I mean, I'm going to get into a bit more, there are pros and cons having, I mean, any publisher, Atlas included, of course. But it's really hard to kind of imagine what it would have been like without them kind of coming in, and they helped again with a lot of the, let's say, voice acting and marketing, and it was it was very good, and I'm very thankful for that relationship and that partnership with them. And the last one is we're still going. So making a game, especially of this size, is very hard. I'm sure you can all attest to how hard it can be to make and release a game. We worked a ton of hours, lots of overtime, for no pay, for generally. I mean, although Atlas, they funded the game, but most of us still worked without pay because we had to pay contractors and things like that, right? And so the game wasn't it was successful enough. It wasn't like a mega hit. I mean, we're rolling in millions and millions of dollars, but we're still making games. And I kind of look at this. There's a part of Proverbs where it says, God, give me enough money that I'm not going to be tempted to steal, but not so much that I forget you, And I really kind of look at that and say, Scott Adams had his whole thing, right? He made so much money, or he was so successful that he really got to his head. And so that has not happened to me, not because of anything to do with me, but because the public has not deemed it so. But it definitely helps me just be thankful for what I have and stay humble, just still kind of working hard. So I'm thankful that we are still going, making games. Okay. So one thing I wanted to talk about was sort of how we dealt with kind of decision making during the game and how we did creative control. So as I mentioned, the game was big, 50 hours. We had a small staff. So I did not want or really have the ability to micromanage every decision. So one of kind of the big ideas behind, I guess, sort of Eden Industries is I wanted the development of the game to reflect every employee, right? Everyone could pour their passion into it and sort of control, within limits, right? Sort of the piece of the game that they were invested in. So many of the team members came from a background. I worked with them in other mainstream development companies. And a lot of them had left, myself included, in a lot of ways, because you don't really have a lot of creative freedoms. Even if you're working on an amazing game, you're still told, do this, implement that, program that, draw this. And sometimes you just really want to get your ideas, your passion out in ways that is not being told what to do. And then many other team members were new to kind of games, but they're really attracted to the creative freedoms of indie development. So that's sort of a bit of what happened with the staff, and what it allowed us to do was kind of let me just kind of be the vision holder, right? So I didn't, again, micromanage everyone's decision. A lot of people, you get my artist, he would just draw stuff, and mostly I'd be like, that's great, that's fine, unless it was horrible for whatever reason, but usually 99% of the times, that's great, that's awesome. The music, yeah, that's good. But I evaluated everything according to the game's pillars. So if you ever have had to write a game design document, especially for publishers or anything like that, they love seeing what your game's pillars are, right? These are kind of the big things that the whole rest of the game rests on. And for us, some of them were we wanted a modern theme. So the art in the game, the levels, it should reflect a modern theme. And we had some things in there that kind of, went against it in a way, intentionally sometimes, but really definitely evaluate. We don't want fantasy, we want it to this is a modern setting. It's kind of about, it's kind of tongue-in-cheek political story. It had to kind of hinge on that, right? Another thing we had as a pillar was recruit everybody. So we wanted you to recruit all the citizens. And if you've played a game where you recruit a large cast, Pokemon, Suikoden, right? There's not a lot of reasons to use a whole cast, except maybe just novelty and acquiring them. But we really wanted you to use everybody and really get a feel for every single character. And so this kind of goes back to what I was mentioning about this, kind of streamlined but not simplified. We really, we made decisions okay, how are we going to handle, swapping characters? In the battle, you can restart any battle with a new team. And we did that because we want people to try new characters. We don't want them to have to, walk back to town, go to, whatever, and then switch them up. We wanted them to switch anytime, try things out, and really have that really, kind of feeling you have a good sense of what the characters do. I want to try them out and not kind of be penalized, for switching. Yeah, and so, these kind of pillars and evaluating things according to all these, sort of pillars and the core vision of the game, it really, sort of empowered the team members because they could sort of exercise their creativity. I wasn't telling them, again, draw this, make this level, implement this, right? But it kind of freed me up to focus on things that sort of required my time and sort of my lens that I saw the game through, right? And actually one thing where this is really handy is oftentimes publishers will not see eye to eye with you on things you want to make. But, so they would say, well, we don't like this for whatever reason, or we don't like that. But a lot of the time I could say, well, look, I mean, these are the pillars of the game. Like, I sent you the GDD, the game design document. You agree these are good pillars. These are the reasons why we did it. And I think it's really a cohesive, kind of system. And then they go, oh, okay, fine. So having a really core set of like, this is what the game's about. This is why we're making these decisions can really help protect your vision, especially when someone who's like paying you money, maybe wants you to change it, right? But yeah, like this, it didn't always work out well. Like sometimes team members were upset that I had sort of final cut. It was sometimes hard, but having a fully democratic decision-making process can be really hard. Especially again when you're against some time pressure from a publisher, just kind of all sit down and be like, okay, well, let's hash this out for the next week or so. It can be really hard. When I was at Silicon Knights, we sometimes would have 12 people in a room for days, like the whole day, just going over things. And most people wouldn't talk, as is common in big meetings, but they're in there anyway. And it was like, I don't really think we got much done because no one kind of held that vision in that case. So yeah, I think it's pretty good. Had a few drawbacks, but yeah. Question?
Would you mind mentioning your pillars?
Yeah, so one of them was modern theme. So again, all the citizens, they should have, modern jobs, they're modern, relatable characters. Again, we had a couple examples where we kind of bent it for fun, but generally, modern setting. I said, recruit everybody. We wanted you to use everyone, have reasons to do so. So like another example I would say is like, if you play Suikoden, you know that when you bring new characters on the team, you need to get equipment for them. And you're either like going to, cannibalize your other party members to get equipment, or you're going to buy it. And that game has a lot of characters, like 130, whatever it is.
110?
Yeah, it's over 100 anyway, right? And so like, how do you manage 100 people's equipment over the whole game? Your equipment's always changing, you got to keep upgrading. Like it's a nightmare. So one thing we did was say, look, equipment is just going to be like strategic options that change kind of how the character's played, not incremental upgrades. And that way, if you don't want to deal with it, you don't have to. You can just switch into them, and you're good to go. Another one, like I mentioned, is the sort of streamlined but not simplified. And again, so that was, we want people to get in, play the game, and sort of another kind of way we said it was depth if you want it. So the game has a lot of depth, but it's not like in your face all the time, like adjust all these parameters, right? So it's there, but it's sort of just kind of one step removed. Another one was the broader, not longer. So if we want to add content in the game, and if it's mandatory content, we want to make sure this is really good, people are going to like this. And if it's sort of like optional, if it's a recruiting a citizen, if it's a quest, let the player do it if they want to, right? So again, if they want to come in for just hit the highlights and then get out to spend time with their kids, I don't know, they can do that. They don't have to sit through 50 hours, right? Okay. Path to a publisher. So this is, as I mentioned before, I wanted to talk about how we kind of got to this point where we had Atlas as our publisher. So we first revealed Citizens of Earth in January 2013. So this was about 6 months sort of after we were kind of developing. And again, we really had very little in terms of like a cohesive staff. At this point, I don't know, we had a bunch of different artists kind of come and join, and I think at least 1 or 2 sound designers were in and out. Like it's hard to keep track of how many people were kind of in and out by this point. But we had a really cool sort of exclusive reveal by PC Gamer, since again at that time we were targeting sort of just PC. So that was January, so GDC is in March, and I was planning to go there to show the game to press. I had a couple events lined up, and I thought, well, it wouldn't be cool to just show the game to some publishers that I liked. At the time I wasn't even thinking we needed a publisher. I just liked Atlas, I liked some other ones, and thought, wouldn't it be cool to just sit down with them and be like, check out this cool game that I think you'd like. And that was really the motivation. The problem was I didn't know any publishers. Like I'd worked with other publishers in the past, not really for RPGs, but I worked with Nintendo and Activision, Sega, THQ, not really what you typically think of as RPG. And also, I was just like a programmer. I didn't know them personally, I just had distant relationships with them. So again, nothing I could leverage. So, so I didn't know how to get in contact with them. I didn't have any contact information, but I went to the Atlas's website and I found the phone number for their front desk, for their office in California. And I just phoned them and I said, hi, can you connect me to someone at your company who's going to GDC that does business development? And they said, yeah, one moment please. And they passed me to someone, and so I started talking to him and I said, oh, I'd love to meet at GDC, I have this cool game. And at first, he was really skeptical. He's like, I don't know, I'm sure he gets lots of phone calls, I don't know, from people cold calling him. Maybe not, I don't know. But he was skeptical of who I was, why I was calling him out of the blue. But I said, oh, we have this game, we already have one on Steam. That was big. Saying I have this game on Steam, it reviewed well. That kind of I think stopped him from hanging up on me in the first minute or 30 seconds. So the fact that they could look at that was really big. And but yeah, he agreed to meet with me. Not really in any official capacity. We met in a hotel lobby, which is actually pretty common at these events, but it felt kind of strange. Nonetheless, and then I also wanted to meet with Xseed. I don't know if you, they do a lot of publishing of Japanese RPGs usually and localized. And again, I didn't know anyone there, so I found a press release they had sent out for some game, I don't remember what it was. And at the bottom they had the email address for their PR contact. So I just emailed their PR contact and I said, I know you're not the right person for this, but can you just pass the rest of this email on to someone who is right? And they did, and they passed it on to their business developer, and I met with him at GDC as well. So I guess the lesson there is, it pays to kind of pound the pavement and cold call, do whatever you got to do to kind of get your kind of contact there. I also called Square Enix. They did not get back to me, so it doesn't work for everyone. But yeah. So so that actually, so when I met with Atlas, that's GDC 2013. That's March, and that was kind of the start of our talks for them to be the publisher. But it wasn't 9 months later we finally signed a contract. So if you're looking for a publisher for your game, just be aware it can be a long, excruciating process. Yes?
How did you, coming from your background, how did you know the terms to settle on for your contract with the publisher?
I didn't really. So I did. So I'm from Vancouver, Canada, like I mentioned, yeah. And there's the game development scene there is pretty big, right? And so there's multiple schools there that kind of teach game development, things like that. And one of the people there is a lawyer, and he teaches game law. And he offered to look at our contract for free.
Wow.
And to help us out. I normally charge $5.50 an hour or something like that, but he looked at it for free. Just to make sure okay, they're not, trying to pull one over on you, things are looking good. But in terms of, the obligations we had, like I mentioned, so kind of how it works, right, is they say, okay, we'll give you some amount of money, but we'll distribute it over the course of many months, right? So at the end of every month or two, depending on how you kind of arrange it, you send them a bill. And as long as you do what you had previously agreed upon, they will send you the next installment of that money. Now, I was kind of used to the system. Like I said, I'd worked at other companies. I understood so they call it a milestone, right? So I kind of knew how you go from milestone to milestone to milestone to get to the final product. So I generally knew what we had to include in the contract to basically get us from start to finish. But in terms of how much money, we were going to get from them. I don't know. I'm not a master of business negotiations or anything like that. But I thought the money they were offering seemed good. No one else was offering us money, so I figured this was yeah, no one else was banging on our door to give us more. So I thought, okay, this is all right. And I kind of looked at what we were planning on doing, and I thought, okay, it'll work. It's not amazing. It's not a windfall, but it'll kind of work. So I just kind of used my best judgment and sort of what my experience was in the mainstream and kind of just tried to model it according to what I was used to. But yeah, it was tough. They would look at the game and say, well, it's good, but we want more animation in the enemies. So okay, we gotta go back, kind of reanimate them. It's good, but what's the next level like? I've seen one. What's the next level? Now we gotta build some more content, right? And it just went on and on and on. To their credit, if you look at, so for example, our Event Horizon demo in the expo is 1,000 light years more polished than what we brought to GDC. We didn't have a title screen; it was just white text on black citizens of Earth, right? So it was pretty rough. So I think to their credit, they saw the potential, but also realized we need to see what you're going to do with this. So like I said, it was a long process. It, started by say just a phone call. So you never know. You kind of put yourself out there. Pros and cons. So pros, money. They helped us with money. Like I said, a lot of us still worked for no pay. We kind of did like a revenue share thing, but we had a lot of costs that we just couldn't do. We contracted a lot of our. Oh yeah.
Wow.
Well, like I said, it was a really big game, and they, the money we would have needed to all have like a salary for the whole time we were working on it and pay all our contractors was more than they were willing to provide, and still let us do like a revenue share. I don't think there was even an option where they would have fully funded it and then taken all the revenue. Like they just didn't want to have the risk, right, of that much money. So just wanted to have a cautious, like, we'll give you some money, not a ton, because it has to go through their whole like internal review, like, are we going to get our money back, things like that. In talking to like other publishers, like they've had, it's not uncommon for publishers to tell me, we funded games and then we had a big loss on it. So they can sometimes be very cautious about how much they give you. So their kind of, I guess, view was, we'll give you like just enough to make it, and then you're on your own for the rest. So yeah, money was good, but I said not enough money really to have a salary. So it was still hard, right? We had kind of enough to kind of do it, but not without like really kind of like pulling up our bootstraps and working hard. So yeah, definitely nothing that we kind of like coast. We're great now. We can just develop the game. So sometimes they have good feedback. There's a lot of them that take a look at the game, from business people to marketing, QA, lots of them. So they have lots of good feedback. Often it's very annoying feedback. They would say things I really did not agree with a lot of the time. And sometimes, like I said, when we send them the contract and say, okay, for these milestones, we're going to accomplish this, we're going to accomplish that. In retrospect, maybe I should have explained in a lot more detail what exactly I was delivering, because I would say like, okay, we're going to deliver this level to you. And they would look at it and be like, that stop sign's in a weird spot. The level's not done. I'm like, well, we're not making Sim Urban Planner. Like, I don't care where the stop sign is. The level, the art is done, the content is done. So sometimes it was weird feedback like that. Again, maybe on their end they're like, well, we're giving you money, it's contractual, you have to do it. So, I can see their side of the story. But
would that hold up payment? Just
yes, yeah. So if they had any issue with the game, they wouldn't give us the money until we addressed all their feedback. Yeah.
Do you feel that there was anything that was really important to you that you had to compromise in order to make them happy?
There are a couple things. So, like, one of the things that again, with the idea that we're having sort of the broader, not longer pillar, right? So we had a world that was pretty open and non-linear in a lot of cases. So we'd have like kind of these big environments, like you go kind of wander in this big like kind of campsite for kids run amok, and kind of this like big kind of like weird desert area. And they're like, well, the level's too big. It's just too big. We don't like it. And the thing is sometimes like this happens. This is not just publishers. Sometimes people that play your game will have comments that when you hear them, you're like, well, you're wrong, right? It's not. But they're making the comment for a reason, right? Something isn't resonating with them. So, like for example, in that case, what I did was I literally just like split the level into 4 and had like screen transitions, and then they were fine, right? So it wasn't like the size of the level. It was just they wanted sort of like more manageable chunks with a discrete. Now you are in the next area, right?
Yeah. So it's more a matter of them just kind of communicating it as lazily or maybe poorly as. Really, at the end of the day, it's like it just sounded like they knew what they wanted, but it felt like they weren't able to really communicate the idea effectively. And so, but do you also think that that was this the game that you wanted to make all said and done, even with their critique?
Yeah.
And one of the things that actually made it better, because like what you're saying too is that like I think this is a weird balance. It's kind of in between like a George Lucas, and then there's like the heavy-handed studio. So it's kind of like George Lucas on his own,
Right.
just
Yeah.
so he could have benefited from some help from the studio kind of stepping in and saying that, hey, maybe you should consider this,
Yeah.
but because You know, but then there's like the other balance, you know, where the studio come in completely, there's nothing unique about it, it's just these money pits, and they fit in to stand out philosophy.
Yeah.
So do you think it's like, you know, a good match between the two of them where, you know, you ready to come out with the product that you wanted, or was it shooting heavy in the studio, or what?
So I definitely think I was able to kind of get the final vision of the game that I wanted. And again, because I had very clear, again, like the pillars, the game design, and very clear answers for why I made the decisions I made, you know, to Atlas's credit, they're often very good about going, okay, all right, like we see where you're coming from, you have good reasons.
Right.
It wasn't just like, I felt like doing that, whatever, right? So, and I mean, you know, they're not wrong to ask the question, right? It makes you think, and like thinking about like, okay, do I really know why I implemented it that way? Do I really know why I designed it that way? I mean, it can be helpful, right, to sort of have that sort of, I don't know, I don't want to say like devil on your shoulder, kind of like, meh, but no, I mean, they asked, you know, they sort of asked the right question, even if sometimes, you know, it was annoying and I had to deal with it, but I think in the end, it did make the game sort of better in a sense, because I did have to sort of very clearly know for myself and communicate what the design was, how everything fit together, and then like I said, in the end, I did kind of keep to my final vision, and they were very good about, you know, understanding what it was and knowing that I had good reasons for it. Yeah.
Related to, Atlas tends to make more mature RPGs for older audiences. Did you ever have any issues fighting for or against suggestions to make things that would have been inappropriate to you as a Christian?
So there was one very brief conversation where they're like, okay, should we put fan service in this game? Now, I had not really heard that term at the time. Really, what they mean is sort of like gratuitous, scantily clad characters, which don't really fit with the characters we have. I mean, there's not a lot of, you know, sex appeal in this game, intentionally so.
Sexy homeless girl.
Yeah. You know, like, that's a very good point. Like we had, so the majority of my team is not Christian, also. So I, you know, again, part of the vision was making sure that the game I was making also reflected like something that I was personally proud of according to my like values, right? So when I was working at Silicon Knights, they make a lot of like horror and violent games, and so I really learned a lesson. Like, you know what? I don't want to make games that I am not like proud of, like personally according to what I believe. And so, for example, we have a character in the game that's a lifeguard, and one of the other guys on the team said, "Oh, you know, this is the perfect time to get some sex appeal. You should have the like Baywatch lifeguard." And I was like, "No." So luckily my artist saw, like, he really agreed with me, so he made it this butch, like Russian woman with like blue hair, and it's just funny. Like, it's not what you think of when you're a lifeguard, so it's a really funny character, and we kind of turn your expectations kind of on your head. And that was sort of our way of dealing with, you know, those kind of questions. Like, just, you know, the game style just didn't really fit with it, and so instead of just saying like, well, no, I don't want that, we would just come up with, you know, something better. You know, because when you come up with like a better solution, you know, then kind of the arguments go away. You're like, well, this is even better. Yeah.
Also, another question pertaining to Atlas. Atlas is a smaller publishing group than a lot of the other ones you mentioned. Was there a real difference of working with a group that mostly does their own games and mostly does Japanese games, and now they're doing this game from this outside studio in the Western area? Was there any real major differences in the way that impacted development and working with them?
Yeah, like, so you mentioned, you know, they are a bit smaller, you know, compared to a lot of publishers, and essentially like all their development is in Japan. So historically their North American branch was really just localizing Japanese games. And only in the last little while did they kind of get a little more leeway from their parent company to start, you know, publishing and distributing like North American made games. But yeah, it was challenging in a sense because, again, you know, their North American side grew out of like sort of a localization sort of studio, right, or, you know, localization branch, not like a developer.
Yeah, they mostly like done Japanese stuff and like the Shin Megami Tensei stuff, their own things.
Yeah, so sometimes, you know, like for example, like dealing with like Nintendo. Nintendo's a great example. Like they'll come over and they will sit down and play the same piece of like your game over and over and over and over and over. And it's good, like they get down to like with a laser focus, like what needs to be changed, right?
That's awesome.
It's very awesome.
Wow.
And it's a great kind of learning opportunity to work with them. But again, they're kind of company they are is very, very different than, like a North American publisher whose main focus historically was like localization. So that was tough sometimes, like, again, trying to explain things from, like game design or like, programming or art, which they have opinions about, but not necessarily is sort of like, kind of where they come from, right?
So it seemed like it was also kind of a learning opportunity on Atlas's front.
We did a lot of things with them they'd never done before. They never released on the Wii U. They never released that many, kind of SKUs simultaneously. And like they had worked with some other North American developers, never a Canadian one, so that was a first for them. So yeah, I think it was a learning opportunity on both our sides for sure. We both made mistakes. We both did things well. Like I said, I'm very thankful for them, partnering us with the game. But yeah, it was definitely a learning opportunity, I think, on both sides.
It sounds like in a way, because they're so new to publishing Western games, it might have helped benefit how quirky and unique the game is in the end. Like they're a fairly new group in this, and it kind of might have given you some more creative freedom than you might have gotten with a larger publishing group.
Yeah, and actually one thing that's very good about them is they really wanted to treat the game like a full title in terms of like marketing it. So, I mean, they do have, of course, their big flagship series, Shin Megami Tensei, Persona, things, right? But even for these like smaller indie games like us, and they had a couple other ones, they still wanted to treat it like a full game in terms of how they market it. So we had a big booth at E3, we had all these things, and actually, just randomly, I've talked to other publishers, like I'm showing them Event Horizon at E3, I was sitting down with them, and they'd be, oh, how does Citizen Earth do? And we talk, and they said, Atlas did a really good job marketing that game, just out of the blue. So I think, they're, in a sense, their small size maybe did help, because they're like, hey, we really can focus on this, and, kind of do a good job, right?
I mean, I heard about the game via, I believe, their Facebook, and I'd assumed it was some sort of weird Japanese import game, because I'd never seen Atlas doing a American game before, so when I found out we were going to be talking about it here, that caught me off guard. I mean, it's weird to see them doing an American, or Canadian in this case, release, much less one that is at CGDC, so that was, I mean, that's one of the, I think it's one of the only games at CGDC I heard of without being connected to CGDC.
Okay, yeah.
So.
Yeah, so it was a great opportunity for us for sure. Yeah.
When?
So basically how it worked was like, because the talking with them was such a long process, like, we had said to them like, oh, well, because again, up until we signed the contract, their kind of stance was like, yes, we're interested, but we're not making a commitment to publish this game. So they were very, aware that, we were probably seeking other kind of opportunities. And so we said to them one time, hey, we're planning on doing a Kickstarter. What do you think about that? And they're like, oh, that's probably a good idea. They even gave us feedback on it. The Kickstarter failed, but anyway, what are you gonna do?
What are those landmines?
Yeah. So one of the big ones for us was I really wanted to retain the IP. They had no problem with that. But I went through, like when I talked to like that lawyer I mentioned, like I indicated like I really wanted to retain the IP. I got him to put in all these different like clauses, really clarifying like under no circumstance like do they have the IP? I have the IP for every possible reason you can imagine. And yeah, Atlas was fine with that. Probably maybe not sure why I was putting all those clauses into the contract, but so that was something that was really important to me personally. Like I really just wanted to make sure that I had it. One thing I would say was when you're doing the terms of like those milestones, like what you're delivering every month, probably more detail will help you, just so there's no confusion. If you think you're doing one thing and they think another, I mean, that's just a pitfall, right? Because again, there's money on the line, there's deadlines, and if there's some miscommunication about what you think you're delivering, what they think you're delivering, it just gets bad. And then, I mean, it just kind of snowballs, right? Because if you're late on one, you're gonna spend a whole bunch of time fixing it, you're probably gonna be late on the next one, and it just gets worse, right? So really clarifying what exactly you're delivering is very good. And then, I mean, there's a lot of things, like, so, a publisher might say, hey, we'll do marketing. Well, a good thing to clarify is like, well, what do you mean by that? Like, what are you going to do? And in my experience, a lot of publishers, they'll say things like, well, we have a plan. And like, so the lawyer especially that I went to said, like, get them to put in writing what they will do. And sometimes it's hard to get a publisher to do that, because they'll say things like, well, we want to see how the game develops before we build our marketing strategy, which is sort of fair, but at the same time, like, if they say they're going to handle something, getting very clear legal in writing what they're going to do can sort of help in the end. I mean, hopefully it doesn't come to the point where you're like accusing them of not, fulfilling their end of the contract, but having things like that in writing is good. I mentioned, I said QA was sort of a big problem. I think clarifying the language in the contract of exactly what they were going to handle, what they expected us to handle, timelines for it, things like that I think would have been really good. But I think sometimes it depends on what's important to you as well, right? They said like, hey, if you make DLC, are we still going to share the revenue? And we didn't make DLC, but I was like, yeah, okay, that's fine. I didn't really have a huge issue with it either way. But maybe you are adamant, like, any DLC is mine, right? And you probably can negotiate that if you have sufficient cause and are willing to kind of budge on other things. So, there's a couple things, like I said, IP is maybe important to you, exactly what's in the contract, exactly what the publisher's responsibilities are. Because again, they may say they'll do X, Y, Z, but unlike your very, hopefully clearly delineated milestones, they won't typically have something of that detail. So you want to clarify that. And then again, just whatever's personally important to you, right? I think there was something in there that said if we make toys something, I can't remember what it was, but there's something in there about toys or physical goods. Again, if you really care about that, maybe that's something you want to clarify. I didn't really care, so I was like, yeah, whatever you say about toys, that's fine. Another thing actually, again, kind of related to IP, was they wanted what's called a first right of refusal. So if we make anything related to the IP again, we have to bring it to them kind of first, give them a chance to offer to develop it, which I was fine with. I said, yeah, that's no problem. But again, if you want to keep options open, maybe you don't want that. For the Japanese release, they sub-licensed it to a company called Arc System Works to the release there. And again, some developers don't like that. They want to kind of source their own deals in different territories, think they can get a better deal. So again, if you want to kind of do that work, you probably can negotiate that in the contract, but it just depends on what are your priorities and what's really important to you. Okay.
5 minutes.
Yeah.
5 minutes.
5 minutes? Okay, all right, let's just hammer through this. Okay, so like I said, bureaucratic overhead, they had a lot of kind of stuff to deal with, marketing, vice president, business development. In with platform holders, so they got us into Nintendo and Sony's kind of trailers for upcoming games, things I never could have done that, obviously. So that was great. Like I said, Con had to fight to kind of preserve the vision sometimes. Help with marketing, they take revenue, of course, and always in a time crunch. It's always time pressure, month to month to month, right? So that can be hard. Development problems. Like I said, we had a big staff flux. We had at least seven animators in the project that would do a couple characters and then leave and come and go. So having a sort of consistent animated quality was really horrible. 3 artists joined and left at various points, including the one that was originally going to be on the team. We partnered with a local university in Vancouver to hire a programming intern. He quit almost immediately. I guess the realities of video game development were not up to his, passion. Okay. 2 sound designers joined and quit. The main level designer went through a divorce half of the project, so that was probably most hard on him, of course, but hard on the rest of the team having to deal with what that would mean. The sound designer that helped us kind of finish the game didn't know RPGs very well, so we brought in sort of external contractor. They fought all the time. I was having to have big Skype mediation sessions. And again, geography, we were stretched across everywhere. That was really hard. Development successes, so I mentioned the vision, kept it. So we had, it was a long, hard development. We really wanted to keep kind of passion and energy throughout the game. Just a side note, after we shipped the game, I had a friend that was doing his master's in business or something like that. And for his project, he had to evaluate what he called a high functioning team or something like that, fast iterating team, I don't know. And so he interviewed most of the staff, most of the team members to get kind of their thoughts on it. And it was all anonymous. I don't know who said what, but most of them said the fact that myself especially, our director too, was so passionate about the game and had such high energy, it really motivated everyone. So everyone was kind of into the game because they saw how much we cared about it. And so that helped a lot. So yeah, passion, energy, even kind of in the downtime when you're right in the thick of it is really important. We actually managed to ship it, which is great on a lot of platforms. And at the end of the project, we had this really cool engine. Now we're using for a lot of other kind of games and RPGs. So that was a really cool kind of byproduct. Did I miss one? Oh no, okay. So platforms, like I mentioned, 5 platforms. Difficult, or kind of rare, but It's difficult, but it's, like I said, a lot of bureaucracy and weird rules. You have to like go through, I said, like, North America and Europe separately. And it's weird things, like Nintendo on the 3DS and Wii U has like this e-manual you can access, right? Maybe something weird, like, oh, this image looks weird or something, the whole game's kicked out of certification. And then you gotta like reapply later, and it's like little things can just, derail like a whole plan, because again, you have to apply to the certification process like a month in advance, right? It's really hard, so dev kits are expensive. While some platforms sold better than others, having it visible on like, every press site that covered, any of those platforms showed the game. So someone would see it maybe like for Vita, but then maybe they buy it for PS4, right? So having just visibility across so many different types of coverage helped a lot. So just a couple little breakdowns. So Steam, distribution is easy. You can get your game on there. They don't really have any rules like certification like the other companies do. But the market is kind of getting pretty flooded, so that can be hard. We had some friends recently that released a game on Steam, and there was like 11 or 12 games that released on that day. So they were kicked off the new release page on the day they released. And that is tough. Whereas obviously on the consoles, a lot less stuff comes out. You can maintain visibility a lot longer. PS4, pretty good platform, our bestseller. Kind of it's good tools to work with, which is great. 3DS, this is our second best platform in sales, and it was actually really key because Atlas was adamant we needed a 3DS port for the contract. They thought it was a very important platform, we needed it, and as far as I'm aware, there's no game engine that works on 3DS. I don't believe Unity does, pretty sure, definitely nothing else. And so if we did not make our own game engine, we probably would not have got that contract.
Wow.
So one of the reasons that you'll find out tomorrow in my talk on your own game engine is it gives you opportunity to do stuff like that. Wii U, not the best seller, it was fun, I like it. It's got a cool kind of tablet, it's got touch, HD art, kind of a cool mix of the features of other platforms. Vita, also not the best seller. Looked kind of cool, it's like high-res handheld. Yeah, moving on. Marketing, Atlas did most of the marketing. Website, trailer, E3 booth, they contacted press, got us good billing with Nintendo and Sony. We did some like community management until I got kind of exhausted with that. We did kind of giveaways at E3, promotional material Atlas used, and kind of crucially, we teamed up for the Create a Citizen contest. So this is the beekeeper in the game. This was a fan drawing. Oh, sorry, not this art, but the character of the beekeeper was a fan drawing. They had a contest, and so this was kind of picked as the winner. So we made it and put it in the game. People really seemed to like that. That was pretty cool. Christian. So is it a Christian game? No. Partly because, like I said, most of the staff is not Christian, so that would probably not work out too well. Citizens of Earth is no exception to this. But, like I mentioned before, I kind of infuse my beliefs into what the game's about, right? So, one, fun for all ages. Like I said, work at Silicon Knights. I don't want to make adult-only, mature games. I played games as a kid. I like being able to do that, play with your family. The ESRB gave us E10 plus because we had a sea captain with a corncob pipe. They didn't like that. But it's fun for everybody and suitable for even kids. Regular people are the heroes. So this was sort of a thematic hook, but it also like kind of underscored my belief that like everyone is meaningful, everyone is special, and we really wanted to, kind of, put that in the game, and kind of going along with that, like every person has value. So the game very intentionally had an equal number of male and female heroes across like a huge racial spectrum. Like we tried getting everyone. We had a girl in a wheelchair as a hero, and a pregnant woman. I really just wanted to say, like, look, everyone is a hero, everyone is valuable, and just kind of, again, it was sort of a thematic idea of the game, but also a personal belief, right? Okay, what we learned. Aim big, right? So we started small, but we really wanted to aim big and see what we could do. Having the vision clearly defined allowed us to sort of evaluate the consistency of decisions, make sure we were heading in the right direction throughout the whole process. Core team, it's kind of obvious, the core team is critical for consistency and stability. We really want to do that from now on, but it's easier said than done sometimes. Play test often, even or especially if the game is big. Like I mentioned, 50 hours takes like over a week to play one time, and you probably got to play a lot of times to make sure it's all good, so that can be hard. Using your own game engine can be very beneficial, especially if you plan for the long term. So like, I'm in the game industry, it's been 10 years, I'm going to be in it for the next 50, 60 until I die. So I'm going in for the long term. Multi-platform release is difficult, but it's very fun. It's cool to have your game on so many devices and platforms, and it's very cool for marketing and visibility. Kind kind of show what's next. So this is Event Horizon. We got it at the expo. Kind of a sort of fun new RPG, colorful again. We got this game called Purgatory working on. It's sort of like a strategy game where you can ally with Purgatory, heaven or hell, to kind of craft your destiny and save or control the fate of the afterlife, right? We're working on Waveform 2. So this is a sequel to our first game. We got a grant from the Canadian government, or the government of British Columbia, the province where I'm from, to make this game, which is pretty cool. So we're working on this. So yeah, kind of a diverse set of questions. I guess we already asked a lot of questions, but if there's any more, yeah.
Are you still planning on using Atlas as a publisher, or are you looking at different publishers to be?
I mean, I'd say both. I've showed them Event Horizon, they liked it, still talking with them. I still really, value and like that relationship. But I mean, sometimes, you never know, right? They may be like, okay, this game's not for us. So, still talking with them, but also talking to other publishers too.
They got first right of refusal, you said?
For anything Citizens of Earth related, yeah. Yeah. But Event Horizon's not a Citizens of Earth game, so. Yeah.
You wouldn't choose to self-publish at this point?
I mean, it's hard. Especially, we're trying to make a big game. We could do it, but it would take us a long time if we were, individually doing every bit of art. So having money to contract other people, bring them on to kind of fill out the game world, lets us kind of release in a time frame that's a little more palatable. Yep.
You mentioned team size. How big was your team throughout the project?
So it fluctuated a lot. At its peak, it was probably about 12. That's 2, 3 kind of full-time, a lot of part-time, a lot of contractors. So like I mentioned, we're spread across a lot of different countries. So we would work with people even if they only did part-time. We didn't have an office for them to come to anyway. So we had a lot of sort of part-time contractors. But it was probably 12 bodies in the mix at its peak. Ramping up as we got into production, and then kind of ramping down as we kind of get into just beta, alpha, kind of getting ready for release. So
What was the minimum?
minimum? I don't know. Again, there's a couple. Myself and another programmer were certainly kind of core. So the two of us, art director was definitely important. And I mean, again, we had a couple other people, level designers and musicians that were they were core, they did everything in that field. But again, that may have only been 5 hours a week sometimes, right? So yeah.
It seemed to be wearing a lot of hats. Do you miss the days of just programming? Or?
I kind of don't, and the reason is I love programming, but what I found was that I equally love game design, and when I'm doing either one exclusive or too long, I really miss the other one. So I like being able to, especially now that I have my own company, I can do both at the same time. I design something and program it, it's all kind of together, and that really works really well for me. Sometimes it is too many hats. I wish, like I said, dealing with community management really kind of burnt me out. I wish I didn't have to kind of do that, and then to do programming and design and manage a team, do publisher relations, there's a lot, and kind of I wish I didn't have to do all of those kind of things, which I don't like and are not really my specialty. But yeah, sometimes limited staff, you got to do what you got to do. Yep.
On the QA side, what are some specific things you think could have gone better, like reviewing test plans or something like that?
Yeah, I think, so one thing that happened was, we would send Atlas the build on every platform, right? So we'd send PC, PS4, Vita, 3DS, Wii U, and they would kind of test them all independently, which I felt sort of was unnecessary since it's the same game 5 times. So if they would have just tested, for example, PC, which is easy to test, easy for us to debug, easy for us to fix, and that, all the fixes, or almost all of them, would just sort of be applied to all the other platforms on the next build. That would have really sped things up. I wish I was able to tell them what to test a bit more. I know what's in the game. I could have, I wish I could have said things like, okay, really prioritize, these characters, these kind of things. But
did you guys not talk too much about QA upfront, or was it?
Yeah, not a lot. I mean, again, so coming from a mainstream background, I knew what it was like to have QA with a publisher, but not to the extent of managing exactly how that process goes. So definitely that's something I want to do for any future project, is really clearly nail down this is the timeline of QA. This is what you're going to be testing and in what order, and things like that. One of the things I've sort of built into my engine now actually is an auto tester, so the game plays itself. And that, from start to finish, it'll do everything it needs to do the quest, run around the world, with pathfinding and everything. So that, hopefully going to eliminate a lot of the bugs just by virtue of I can run it overnight on every platform. And so, yeah. Yep.
Alright, so since you had like so many hours of gameplay, I take it that would have, had quite a bit of dialogue, potential dialogue.
Yeah.
How did you handle like the writing? Like, did
Yeah.
you
So I did most of the writing sort of initially, again, because I sort of had this general story I wanted to tell. I mean, I don't really necessarily consider myself like a real writer in a sense, but I did have like an idea of a story I wanted to get across. And then Atlas, I mean, they had a lot of experience with localization, so they're used to scripts and things like that. So they helped a lot with, kind of refining it, especially for the voice acting. So they were going to handle the voice acting, so they said, okay, well, we're going to change this line because we think it would sound better coming out of like someone spoken compared to like, how it looks just read. So they did a lot of that. But then other people on the team, like Kyle in the back of the room there, he did help with level design and scripts and quests. He wrote a lot of the dialogue too. And then, I mean, again, that was also edited by Atlas, but he helped out with that. And again, other team members who had a passion for what they're working on, they can contribute. But certainly I'd say, yeah, like sort of I did most of sort of the core of what the story was about, and Atlas kind of like smoothed over a lot of the text. Yep.
How did your professional industry experience affect your ability to manage time, or I guess manage the project and leverage your time? Did you carry over best practices, or did you wing it sometimes?
One thing that was really hard was like, I mean, in my mainstream experience, I worked in an office. We were all there in the office together, which was not the case for this game. So some things just don't work. I mean, if you want to try to have, like a scrum session with people in different time zones and across Skype, like it just doesn't really work as well, right? But the one thing, I mean, it's kind of sad to say, the one thing that I did take away was when I worked mainstream, I mean, you work a lot of hours. You work 80 hours a week, you work all the time, which is not a great lesson to learn, I guess, but I mean, it prepared me to like, I am aware of like, when I say I'm going to make this game, and I'm saying I'm aiming big, like I know what that means. Like I know I'm going to have to work hard. And so I was prepared for the realities of that. But yeah, in terms of like, managing the team, like I said, I tried to keep my passion up, my energy up, give them sort of like what they wanted. Like I said, a lot of people wanted to put their passion in the game, their creative control, so allowing them the freedom to kind of get out what they wanted from the game. I think that helped a lot to kind of keep people motivated and invested. Anything else, or? Yeah. Any other questions? Yeah.
Why didn't you target the Xbox?
Pretty much just because Atlas thought there weren't a lot of RPG players on there, and so they said, it might not be worth the time on that. The other kind of weird thing is, so... What was that?
Big American machine.
Yeah.
They really don't like the
yeah, well, 'cause the other funny thing too was, I'm trying to remember now, because in 2014 it must have been, early in the year, I went to an Xbox One conference at Microsoft, and I asked them, when can I get a dev kit? And they said, I don't know. And and at that time we were, going over like the specifics of the platforms with Atlas, and like I was an authorized Nintendo developer in Sony, and like I knew we could get the dev kits. And to put a platform into a contract when I didn't know when I could get a dev kit, it was kind of risky. So yeah, we opted not to do that one. Anything else? Good. Okay, thank you guys so much.